We do. So, and a lot of it's horse dependent, right? Some horses' feet can tolerate no shoes versus shoes. Um, I will say horses that don't have shoes, they're a lot more in general sure-footed on the treadmill.
Mm.
So they step cleaner, they land more evenly, even if they have um like an atrophied side or
Hmm.
their one side or something like that, they will actually be compensating a little bit better for it when they're on the treadmill that we can hear. So one thing we pay attention to when we're watching a horse on the treadmill is the sound that their feet are making on the belt.
Mm.
Whether or not if it sounds like they're landing flat-footed, toe first, heel first, and whether or not if there's one foot that's hitting harder than the others, like if they're slapping it down versus resting it down. And I will say in general, the barefoot horses tend to be even sounding, a little bit more even sounding, and you don't get the slap noise as often. Um, we have horses. We have a couple. We have a couple of dressage horses that only have hind shoes. Um, and it's interesting because when they start to get a little tired on the treadmill, they will actually slip a little bit on their front end because they're off weighting from the traction and twisting from behind and putting that on their front. Um, and so you can see how two shoes versus four shoes or barefoot all day around kind of does affect the balance of the horse from front to back for sure.
Interesting.
And then four shoes, I will say it's going to be, you're going to see the difference in if they're growing abnormally, right? So if they're growing high on the medial side on one foot versus the other, and
Mm.
that having the shoe on there is going to make, is what I will say is that you will see it through their body a little higher up. But it also is a really good telling point because you can say, hey, we have something going on here. We can see it in the hip, we can see it in the neck, we can see it in the way they're moving this shoulder. They're stabby through the shoulder, or hey, they're dropping this hip on the treadmill. And the other thing too with horses that have shoes on, you can actually see the choice in shoe makes a big difference on their traction ability.
In terms of like the
And
metal.
mm-hmm.
Mm.
Yeah, so shoes that don't have a good ridge where the nail heads sit,
Hmm.
those are the ones without a ridge are a lot slicker. You would think, oh, well, it's still a shoe. We still have traction. Not necessarily. It's actually creating too smooth of a surface. And you'll have less traction than the horse that's barefoot.
Hmm.
Um, we're horses that have a nice convex shoe that's actually more of like a sport type shoe.
Hmm.
Um, they have better traction on the treadmill than other ones would.
Hmm.
And you can see it too. You can see how if they rely on the traction or if they rely on their muscle when they're moving.
Hmm.
So that's probably one of the biggest things we've seen is horses that have issues in the stifle, SI, or lumbar sacral area, so
Hmm.
up high type stuff, or
Hmm.
even the whorl bone and hip, they will tend to slip and twist in the hind end on the treadmill um, because they rely on the traction of the shoe off the treadmill.
Mm.
We've had quite a few horses actually where we're like, hey, this is a regular thing, especially once the water height gets above 6 to 8 inches because they're
Hmm.
having to go through that range of motion, especially up high. They can't just go through it in the hock and the fetlock anymore.
Hmm.
And we start hitting that area and they get a little slippy. And it's not a lot, but like their foot will just slip an inch or two on the belt. And we've had a lot of people come back to us, a month or 2 months later, being like, hey, we actually injected this. And then their horse is able to walk on the treadmill no problem. Um, I will say shoes do create a false sense of hind end strength and traction
Mm.
when you're working just out on your own in an arena or on the grass or something like that, versus actually building up the muscle for the horse to control the gait.
Mm.